Welcome to the Shame-Free Zone. I'm Veronica Monet, and I've got two very sexy, dynamic women here today to talk about sacred sexuality, male multiple orgasm, and cervical orgasms for female-bodied persons. I can't wait to get all the details about that, and I'm sure you can't wait to hear all the details either. And of course, they're going to be telling us all of this stuff within the context of spiritual sexuality and why you would even want to have a spiritual sexual journey. But before I introduce them, I'm going to read a little bit about their bio to you. It's really exciting. So Dr. Willow Brown holds a doctorate in Chinese medicine. She blends ancient Taoist philosophy with sexual and spiritual practices that ignite the soul's true calling. She is devoted to the sexual healing of humanity and works to promote and open receptive pleasure pathways in each person she works with. As the pleasure pathways open up on a cellular level, you experience deep sensuality and love and shift somatically. Welcome to the Shame-Free Zone, Dr. Willow.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. And my other guest is Leah Piper. Leah Piper is the co-founder of Sex Reimagined podcast and the founder of More Love Works. She is an intimacy expert with multiple advanced certifications in Tantra yoga, positive psychology, and somatic therapies. And with over 2 decades of experience facilitating groups and supporting couples and individuals in her private practice, she's witnessed thousands of people heal from sexual trauma and awaken sleeping pleasures. And it all started with a little book on tantric sex that she stumbled upon 20 years ago that completely transformed her life. And Leah, welcome to the Shame-Free Zone.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm wondering if that little book was penned by Carolyn or Charles Muir.
It was penned by both of them. Yes. Tantra, the Art of Conscious Loving was the name of the book.
Cool. I think you've had a journey with the Muirs. Can we hear just a tiny bit about that?
Yeah, big journey. Went to a weekend seminar knowing that I was going to do the teacher training and it was a prerequisite. Had read the book and it just opened up so many doors and really started to answer some big questions inside my being, which was there's got to be something more to sex. And when I read that book, it was like ding, 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 they found it. So I wanted to learn how to help other people find it and ended up studying with them, with both Charles and Caroline. And then Charles, they weren't together at the time. They'd been divorced for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And then I did the teacher training. And then Charles and I ended up falling in love. And we were together for 8 years.
wow.
I was the co-facilitator of the weekend seminars and the teacher trainings
Right.
very quickly soon after that. And then we broke up as relationships often do, but happily even after a breakup. And now we're both married to different wonderful people. And we live a mile from each other.
Charles had gotten remarried. I didn't realize that.
And we live a mile away, and we sometimes have Sundays family dinners. And when I moved to Sacramento, he moved to Sacramento. So we've just stayed very close.
That's the thing about poly. Everybody thinks it's about some kind of crazy sexual orgies. And to me, poly is about extended family.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to sum it
and
up.
we may stop coupling with each other romantically, but it's if you have the poly mentality, then love is forever.
Yeah, and you also really hope that even when you choose to not cohabitate with each other and stop wanting to be romantic, you still want their happiness for them. You hope that they still have extraordinary love in their life and that you can remain close if friendship is the primary foundation of the relationship. And that's something that Charles is very good at. He's very good at prioritizing friendship, even over those sort of beloved roles that we often play.
He must be, because he kind of was very successful with women.
Totally. And he's still very good friends with Caroline. I mean, him and Caroline.
I know. I had her on this show not long ago, and she still calls him her beloved.
Yeah. Yeah. And she was so good to me. I actually went to her before our first date and I said, look, I don't know what to expect from this thing. Charles asked me out. I'm totally nervous. I don't want to do anything that would put a rupture in our connection or in your connection with Charles. So how do you feel about this? And she said, honey, I chose him to be my healer and you'd be a damn fool not to choose him to be yours. And I said, well, then I'm in.
That sounds like her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's Willow. I find I'm going to tell you, you seem very mysterious to me. And I'm wondering.
It's all an illusion.
It's your
Okay.
ethereal nature.
Yeah.
I'm not that mysterious.
He's very
after all.
whimsy.
Well, you kind
That's
of, I think we could say you're mysterious. We could say you're a little reserved, contemplative. And Leah strikes me as ambulant and really expressive. And
Yeah, she's the yang to my yin for sure.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
like fire
right.
and she's like water is how I always think of it.
There we go. How did you guys meet?
Through the Source Tantra trainings, I was in a weekend seminar. I'd been teaching the Taoist sexual practices for probably about 8-9 years or so.
Right.
And then I actually had Charles on a summit that I did, and after we did our interview, we were just chatting, and he was like, "Come to one of the seminars, I'll give you like the deal for being in the industry." And so it took me still, I think, another 2 years to get to it. I was in a relationship at the time that was not quite so like get up and let's go do tantra in the world. So,
Right.
I had to kind of drag him along with me, but eventually I did get him to come with me. And so we went and did a weekend seminar.
Yeah.
And that is where I first met Leah. And I just remember sitting in the audience because I'm a real teacher connoisseur. Sometimes I say teacher snob, but my friend is always correcting me. He's like, "You're a connoisseur, not a snob." And so I just remember sitting in the audience and watching Leah teach, and actually watching them both teach together. And sort of like Charles does this kind of like channeling, transmitting thing where he just kind of like, he's just embodied in the wisdom so deeply. He's been teaching it for over 40 years. And Leah is just just has all the anecdotes and all the like what's the word she's always using, like examples to help you understand, and she's metaphors. She's got all those things and all the stats, and also just like really exuberant and really sort of animated in her teaching. And so as I was watching them, I was like, wow, I'm kind of a combo of what they're doing. And I really I love Charles's teaching and I love his transmission, but I was really just like pretty struck with Leah's teaching abilities. And so it was funny. I was sitting there in the audience and I was like, she and I should teach together, but not thinking that would ever happen or that would ever be a possibility, but just like knowing what I know and then hearing what she knows and the way that she transmits and the way that I transmit. I was like, God, it would be such an epic synergy if we ever did get to do something together. And I think it was about 3 years later that we started the podcast. We got into a little mastermind with another woman in the tantric community. She actually pulled it all together. So bow down to Whitney. She's the reason that Leah and I are doing what we're doing. And we have a great synergy, like a great business wife relationship. It really works well. Plus just
I would
a
say
really close friendship, and that's helpful.
Your website definitely projects business wife.
Does it? I love hearing that. We really complement each other in our differing strengths, which is so great in a business partnership because there are some things that are so over my head that Willow knows, and other things that are so easy for me that are a challenge for her. So it's so nice to be able to lean on somebody to get to the finish line at the end of the day.
And it's inspiring to see women working together in powerful ways. That is my greatest happiness, is seeing women accomplish beautiful, big things together.
Yeah.
I love that.
I want to go down this road, this little rabbit hole around spirituality and sexuality. I think when people think about it, they do mostly think about kind of an om
Mhm.
sexuality, like just sitting there oming or something. Or maybe
Like
they've
it's
been,
only peace. It's only
right,
tranquil. Yeah.
right. Or they think about yab yum, where usually in the
Yeah.
drawings, the female is sitting on the male's lap. I'm When you were talking about Willow, when you're talking about, oh, we should work together. One of the things that came to my mind was that, in my opinion, because I consider sexuality my spiritual path. I have probably a lot of spiritual paths, but it's kind of like the center of it.
Mm.
And I've used sensuality to grave, to manifest, to visualize creatively the things that I want to attract into my life. And I feel like this is an untapped power that the ancients definitely knew about, but that a lot of people don't know about. And when they get exposed to it, sometimes they just get exposed to books about sex magic, which I find pretty pedestrian and banal.
Mhm.
When I'm thinking about the sacred sexuality, there's something really elevating about it, and it can really e- accentuate our potentials. So I teach classes on sacred sexuality to try to boost creativity.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
I
that's
would
great.
love to know what your shared or individual perspectives are on that, and also what else you bring to the table around spirituality and sexuality.
Yeah, I think sacred sexuality and the spiritual element of it, like the foundation of all of that is intimacy.
Yeah.
And so into me, I see, right? It's like this is the mirror that you get to look into another person's
Totally.
eyes, into another person's souls. Little tip for you, for those of you who are getting started on this sacred sexual path, is like looking and gazing into the other person's left eye. And with your two eyes into their left eye is the eye of the soul. And so when you can really bring your presence and focus in on that left eye, it's like something happens for the other person where they drop into a deeper state of presence. There's something called mirror neurons in our brain. So, you know, you see someone yawn and then you have to yawn. It's like when somebody's dropping in with your gaze in full, total presence and appreciation and really acknowledging this essence of you, not just the persona of you, but the essence of you. It opens you in a way. It opens your heart. It opens your third eye. It opens these spiritual centers in your body that allow you to receive more of that reflection of yourself. And, you know, one of the things that we teach a lot is intimacy is based on three pillars, and those are trust, vulnerability, and presence. And so the trust
Mm.
piece, you know, we think, okay, trust the other person. Do I trust this other person? But let's reel it back a little bit and ask ourselves, do I trust myself with this other person? Because if you have a deep sense
Oh,
of
that's
trust
beautiful.
yeah, and if you have a deep sense of trust inside of yourself, then you actually get to choose who you get intimate with. You know, you get to have a lot more agency and sovereignty around the choice of intimacy, because notice love is not one of those pillars. Like, you don't have to be in love with somebody or have like a deep, deep love for somebody to create intimacy with somebody. You can do it at the grocery store, you can do it anywhere. And I think if we were not so afraid to trust, if we could trust ourselves more as individuals, then we would be able to be more vulnerable with others more easily. And that creates a loop of trust
Mm.
and vulnerability between two souls. And when that loop of energy is happening between two souls, presence is just automatic. Presence just comes. And I think that's what we're really missing in our culture and in our world today is that level of presence where it's like I'm in a deep state of my core, my sense of essence, my sense of trust. And so therefore I don't need to put on a mask with you. I don't need to guard myself from you. I don't need to, you know, hide parts of myself from you. I can actually open myself and be fully vulnerable with you, with the other. And then those mirror neurons start firing bringing the other person, and they're like, wow, I suddenly feel more open, more vulnerable, more like I can trust the other person, therefore myself, vice versa.
Yeah.
And that level of presence is what's really missing, especially I think among younger generations, because we're so
Where
distracted.
everybody's heads are buried into their cell phones. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have a hunch that if I ever coach the current high school generation, I'm going to be how to have eye to eye contact.
Yeah.
Look
Yeah.
at the person's face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
don't sit next to them and text them. That's not how that works.
Right.
Yeah.
um, yeah. So you said something really that resonates with me, Willow, and that is the whole idea of trusting yourself. And I actually teach the couples that I coach this, um, which is basically, yes, we extend trust to the people that we love and that we're in relationship with, but hopefully we have done a good job of vetting those people and also having good boundaries with those people, because that's part of trust, is having good boundaries. But ultimately, everybody that we love is going to hurt us in some way, through carelessness, through their own lack of development or insight, just the fact that we're all on this growing journey together and none of us is a finished product. And then just to highlight that, I say things like, okay, just imagine you've been together for 20 years, everything's beautiful, everything's wonderful, but you didn't know that there was a brain tumor pressing against the neurons in your partner's brain. And then one day they just go crazy violent.
Mm.
I mean, it's like, that's why you have to trust you.
Yeah.
So, okay, they go off the deep end of no fault of their own. It's a physical malady, but that you would be prepared to take care of yourself and the situation without collapsing.
Yeah. And to that note, it's like sometimes it's not even like a sudden physical thing that happens. We're all, this is another thing that Leah and I teach a lot, is especially when we're working privately with people, is we all have these handicaps called patterns of protection. We all have our original wound, and that original wound is something that we learn to protect ourselves in a certain way, and then we stamp that out for the rest of our lives. And most people are living in their protective pattern 90% of the time. So we've all got these handicaps that we're walking around with, so it's like, so dropping into that deep level of intimacy, that's why it opens you up spiritually, because it helps you get into that place of presence where you're no longer in pattern. And I think that's one of the most, for both Leah and I, one of the most valuable things that we teach people, because sex and money, those are the biggest triggering things that we deal with on the 3D level as human beings. And if we can spiritualize both of them, then God bless.
I would just like
Well
to add
said.
the piece
Yes.
about self-trust, because I think one of the things that's so powerful about self-trust is that you trust yourself to make a mistake. And
Yeah.
you trust you're going to be okay even if you make a mistake. Okay,
Mm.
so you dated the wrong person, and now but you can trust that you can get out of a relationship and find a partnership again if that's what you want. It's like this thing around really taking risks and knowing that you can take risks. That I think a lot of people wall themselves off, and it's like, can I trust you? Can I trust you? Can I trust you? And instead, it doesn't really matter who's trusting out there. What matters is that I'm connected to my felt sense and my inner guidance, that I am present to the signals in my system, that I'm aware of what is magnetic for me and what maybe isn't healthy for me. And that ability to be self-reflective is something that allows you to keep trusting your own wisdom, your own judgment, helps you with attunement, being able to read situations mostly accurately. And that doesn't mean that your conditioning isn't going to oftentimes give you sort of a filter on what you're seeing. But if you can be aware of our conditioning, like for instance, um, we all have sort of this patriarchal stuff around sexuality. And even if it's stuff we don't believe, I think especially as women, even if we don't even believe it,
Yeah.
we're still sitting on the mountain of conditioning. So we might react around something that is a pattern, like Willow said. So there's ways that we try to protect ourselves, and self-trust can remind us that we're still going to get triggered. We might still go into pattern. We can find ourselves on autopilot, but we can also trust ourselves to be
Yeah.
able to sit back and look at the experience and find the good in it. And also allow the things that we want to change to be possible in the future. So I think trust is
Yeah.
a really, really powerful thing when it comes to sexuality.
Leah, that's a very similar, what you just expressed is very similar to something I teach, which is internal family systems, where we have triggers that activate the firefighters, and the firefighters want to do things that maybe are not in our best interest or in the situation's best interest. In the past, it might have worked when we were younger, but it doesn't work now. And learning how to work with those firefighters and protectors so that they calm down. And then we access this ancient part of our self. In IFS, we call it self, which in my view, it's just been around for as long as our souls have existed. And it's so wise. One of the things that I've experienced, when you were talking about sacred sexuality, is a relief, kind of like, it's almost, if you know what you're doing with sex, it's almost like a psychedelic. It
Oh my
is an
God.
altered state.
Altered state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get so
Yeah.
high on your endorphins and your oxytocin. I mean,
Yeah.
those hormones in your bodies are drugs, and we
Yes.
don't, go ahead.
Yes. But don't you think also that the spiritual aspect of it is that for a moment, we're actually out of
Yeah, there
the
can be a
body's
For
transcendent.
sure, you
trauma
can
responses?
transcend. Yeah,
Totally. The
absolutely.
Yeah.
pleasure and the feeling of connection and the feeling of desire with all that testosterone and the bonding
And the
chemicals and the
rapture.
opioids and the
Ugh.
rapture, all of that is the
Yeah.
buildup to go, we're not separate.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that any of us is separate
Yeah.
is not true. We can let go of these personas and we can meet someplace where it's a very soul to soul
Mm-hmm.
experience and it feels transcendent and mystical and you can't explain it with words. Like language hasn't
Yeah.
evolved enough to be able to describe what's possible when you go that deep with someone. And I think when we talk about the spiritual aspect, and this is sort of also in alignment with the trust and the intimacy and the presence and the vulnerability, is you then have
Yeah.
access to parts of yourself that really want to be seen and loved and made whole. And then also
Yeah.
you can find access to the shameful, dirty, naughty parts of our sexuality. That is still fun. One of the things I love about
Yes.
Tantra is that it really
You know,
brings beauty to sex, but we have this
Leah,
other side of sex that's kind of dirty, naughty, and fun. And we
I'll
can
tell you something.
actually have them come
My
together.
my sexuality was very pornographic for a long time. I was in the sex industry. I produced and appeared in some feminist porn. I chose not to
Cool.
do anything mainstream, but I did feminist porn. And
Now I want to see that.
I could get you a DVD,
Okay, cool.
which, I mean, seriously, DVD, so old fashioned. But then from there, I went on this sacred sexual tantra journey, right? And my introduction to that was my first fire breath orgasm, which is like your clothes are on, you're not even touching yourself. And it was so transformative and it was so amazing to have that. And there were times I would just like have these kriyas come over me just unbidden during the day. It was like I would practically faint. It was so intense. And I pursued that because I'm kind of an extremist, I guess. Once I get into something, I go all
You're
the
all
way.
in. Yeah.
And I've recently realized that I still need my rape fantasies.
Mm.
Yes. And why should they be separate?
Yeah,
I
you can
mean,
have
really,
both. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we
Why
have to
should
start
they?
blending these worlds and realize that it's
Yeah.
a part of finding the wholeness, all of us. And like the thing that Tantra gave me when I was first exploring it was it gave me
Yeah.
access to the wounding in my subconscious, to the shadow part of myself that didn't believe I was lovable or beautiful or
Yeah.
worthy, and had to heal from childhood sexual trauma and all of these things that was keeping me so small. And I was so grateful to have really beautiful, conscious people,
Mm.
get underneath me and help me move that stuff that was keeping me from feeling deeply emotionally loved by others. What a
Yeah.
gift. But there's
Mm-hmm.
this whole other realm of sexuality that's also filled with yummy, naughty bits like rape fantasies and all these other things that we might look at it on the outside and think to judge it. Oh, we shouldn't have those desires. We shouldn't be fantasizing about that. Most of us are raised with what's okay to fantasize about and what's not. And when you start to just own the fact that there are things that turn you on that
Yeah.
society may not see as acceptable or even
Yeah.
safe,
Yeah.
we have to kind of go, wait, this is keeping us separate. There's a way to have all of it, and there's a way to have all of it in a healthy, consensual,
I really love
expansive,
what you're
spiritual
saying there.
way. Yeah.
I really love what you're saying there. I really do. Because I think sometimes, I mean, I was a founding member of the Association for Sexual Energy Professionals.
Oh,
Um,
really?
and it didn't last very long, but there was probably 100 of us. And we had some meetings down in Arizona. This is back in the early aughts when my first book was published in 2005. And it was so like hierarchical in a lot of ways, like we're these tantric purists,
Hmm.
and what we're doing is so above it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
sex workers, dominatrixes, and BDSM is not welcome.
Right.
And I really did not like that. At the time I was working as a dominatrix, and I was like, I play with energy all the time.
Yeah. It's
Yeah. Who are
actually,
you
it
to say that
requires,
it's not as
yeah, it requires
so
a
much
shit ton of
impact? Like,
presence.
yeah,
Yeah. You have
yeah,
to really,
yeah.
Yeah, and
And
you're moving a lot of energy. You're reading a lot of
for
energy.
sure.
And I mean, if you know what you're doing, you are giving people the most peak sexual experiences of their lives,
Which can
and
be totally transcendent.
transformative ones that like
Yeah.
yeah, and
sometimes have.
healing ones. I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
like, I think Tantra's is there's so much beautiful healing that is often taught in many people's iteration of what the teachings are. But what's amazing to me is that BDSM and kink also has incredible transformative. I think it's the same thing. I think they're just different
Yeah.
sides of the same coin, is what
Yeah.
I'm coming to see.
And it's interesting actually if you read the Kama Sutra, BDSM is right in there.
Is that
But
Right.
right? It's been a while since I
people
flipped
miss
through
that
those
part.
pages. Yeah.
It's interesting. Um, yeah, so I really appreciate what you were saying, Leah, about let's integrate these
Yeah.
worlds so that we're not putting one above the other, and that they can flow in and out of each other in a
Yeah.
beautiful way.
And that one could get stronger and grow more potential and more capacity because of the other, if you explore beyond. It's like, what is the we're working with a lot these days in this sexuality realm is the what's her name? Jaya. What's it called?
Oh,
The
the erotic
five,
blueprints.
the erotic blueprints, right? And so,
Uh-huh.
you take that erotic blueprint quiz or whatever, you find out you're like, okay, primarily on this, secondarily on this, maybe tertiary on this. But I think the whole concept there is like, if you can stretch into those realms that you don't naturally go to, you actually get more out of the realms that you naturally are.
Oh, I like that a lot better. The first time I heard that blueprint on Goop, I was kind of like, eh. Uh,
It's
I,
deeper
I
than
hate to
just
put people
the
into little
short framework.
pigeonholes,
Yeah.
I'm always wanting people to expand and diversify and try a lot of different stuff. So I really like what you said there, Willow.
Yeah, it's a general good map, I think that, especially for people who are just getting started on the path and not really sure what they are, have no idea what their partners are. I think that's one of the big things that causes disparity in relationships. And just wait.
My God, you spoke so beautifully. You were like genius level. I can't wait to fucking take that clip of you. It was so good. So
Cool.
good. Yeah.
What
I
did
kept on going, oh, oh, oh. You did such a beautiful job of that.
I don't know what I said, but
It was
Uh,
all about like the trust and presence and
all right,
oh
there
yeah,
we go.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Hello.
We're back.
we're back.
What happened?
I don't know. We lost you for a second. But I
Yeah.
was
Well, you guys, it's probably my internet. I am in Nevada City.
oh,
So
there you go.
my
Yeah.
apologies. I'm going to have to hit record again here.
Okay.
Or
Oh, I'm
or
glad you
It's still
remembered.
recording.
it's still
Still
recording.
Oh, that's right, because
Oh,
we didn't get
yeah.
kicked out.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So all I have to do is go in and edit this section.
Edit this part out. Yeah.
We're good. Yeah. Or,
Yeah,
or maybe I'll leave it in for bloopers.
there you go. I was just talking. I'll pick right back up where we were leaving off.
Please.
So I think that's one of the big disparities in relationships that we see a lot is like somebody might be naturally a sensual type on that blueprint scale, and somebody else might be a kink, and so they might not know that about each other at all, and they
Or
might
even
have
about
a hard,
themselves, which
or
is
about
amazing.
themselves. Yeah, exactly. And so
Usually.
then they don't know how to make those two meet, they don't know how to make those two merge. And it's like, we just never can get our sex right. We can never, like, it was good in the beginning. It's always good in the beginning, right? But then things
Pretty much.
change, things fade, and it, I think that map can be really helpful for a lot of people. And I also agree with you too about, it can be a little bit myopic as well.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this whole idea of ripe timing, because I needed sort of this more poetic, this pursuit of beauty. Like Tantra had this real spiritual aspect, and that was a big draw in the
Right.
early years when I had a lot of healing to do. And having sort of growing up in a Judeo-Christian environment with lots of crazy religious dogma, it's like I was very kind of compartmentalized. I was expansive in the compartmentalization of what I could grapple with. And then like now, well, for instance, I'm doing a BDSM teacher training for 6 months in New York coming up. And I've been thinking, like, when did I become ready
Yeah.
to see new parts of myself, to expand other realms of my sexuality? Because I would have never thought 10 years ago that that would become an interest of mine. And I
Right.
think sometimes we just kind of get bored doing the same old thing. Now, Tantra will always be my first love, but there are times when it's like, I want something else. It's like, I want to go try a different restaurant. And then you discover, you try different things, you go on an adventure, and then you have access to different parts of who you are. And that becomes so exploratory. And it brings so much, I think, connection and spice and juice and fun conversations, and gets you connecting with people because you're learning something. And when I think about some of you who might be listening right now, it's to keep challenging yourself, to learn, to stretch, do a deep dive, and then when that feels complete, or maybe simultaneously, find something else to sink your mouth into, your tongue into, your teeth into. And keep learning, because there's so much to be gained about who you are inside.
And try some new music, for God's sake.
For God's sake, try new
It's
things.
people
Just try
people
new
listen to
things.
the same music.
Oh my gosh. On that note, I was doing a session the other day, and the person that I was working with put on Lana Del Rey on Pandora, like the playlist for Lana Del Rey. And I was like, wow, what is this playlist? It was amazing. So check that one out,
I
y'all.
love Lana Del Rey.
I know. It was just so dark and steamy. It was
Yeah.
fun.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. But something else I'm really crazy about, Billie Eilish's most recent song, Lunch.
Lunch.
I don't know
have to
that
look
one.
that
You have
up.
to put that in the show notes so we can all
Yeah.
find it.
Okay. All right. I'll do that. Yeah. It's all about cunnilingus.
Oh, fun.
That's fun.
Very, very sexy.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Turn me on. I would like to talk a little bit about the healing. You really perked up my ears, Leah, when you were talking about what I would term religious abuse, because I think that when we are pummeled with shame, and particularly sexual shame, that it is a form of abuse.
Mhm.
And that's really picking up a lot of speed right now. The here in America, I don't know that it's happening elsewhere. But in the United States, certainly there's just a lot of conservative forces that are trying to enforce religious dogma, and particularly as it pertains to women's
Mhm.
bodies,
Yeah, and sexuality censorship is like crazy.
canceling contraception. I mean, I can't even believe we're
Yeah,
having these conversations.
right.
Yeah.
I I'm a survivor of rape, incest, and religious abuse. I was raised in a conservative Christian cult, actually born into it. So, and that's one of the reasons I founded the Shame Free Zone.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And and I'm not ashamed to be an incest survivor or a rape survivor, and I'm also not down in the mouth. I have a really vibrant, wonderful sex life and have had for quite some time.
Mhm.
So I'm really wanting to lead that charge on, we could talk about rape, we could talk about child sexual assault without having to, act like we're at our own funeral.
Yeah, totally.
Let's rebirth ourselves, let's heal ourselves, let's move past that,
Yeah.
not in some kind of spiritual bypass way.
Mhm.
I've spent many, many weeks in early recovery under the covers with the lights on and huddled in a fetal position crying. All of that's a rite of passage for any survivor.
Right.
Um, and I lead my clients through that kind of healing, but it's the end goal is to get to celebration and
Hmm.
rebirth.
1000%. Yeah.
Love
And to
that.
claim,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like, there's still parts of my core erotic desire that
Yeah.
is in the theme of being used, being taken advantage of, inappropriate behavior. I mean, when I just take, like, it makes sense. There are things that happened to me as a kid. Yes, it was inappropriate. Yes, it was painful. Yes, there was suffering. But there's also, when you get to the other side, you have
Yeah.
access to things
Yeah.
that are still rich, even if other people don't quite understand it. When you're at peace and you're not wrestling with so much shame,
Yeah.
it liberates you, and then you can get off on the things that were once really scary and painful. And that
Yeah.
is a huge celebration, and that's a big win. That is
It it
victorious as far as I'm
is a big
concerned.
win. My cousin who passed a couple of years ago, I miss her dearly, but she was the director for the Center for Sex Positivity in Seattle, and
Cool.
we were both raised in these really right-wing Christian families. She wasn't sexually abused, but she was physically abused by her dad.
Mhm.
And she went way into kink and loved to get branded and cut and all kinds of really extreme things. For her, it was a way of healing the
Mhm.
fact that she had been beaten as a child.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it
Hmm.
was
Because
hard for me
it,
to understand at first. I felt very protective of her. She's my
yeah.
cousin. I love her. I was horrified to find out what my uncle had done to her.
Yeah.
But I saw her, because we'd have these play parties and I would be in the room, and I saw her getting whipped, and the joy on her face,
Isn't that
Mm.
amazing to
the
witness?
liberation,
Yeah.
It
The
because
yeah,
bliss.
it meets a place inside of her that she knows is love, right?
yeah.
Because even though there was abuse with her father, I'm sure there was also love with her father. And
Oh yeah.
that's one of the kind of confusing, tricky things about it all. And so if you can heal and grow and
Yes.
get to the place where it's like, okay, let's see if I can actually use the painful things that were also mixed and mingled with love to create pleasure, what could happen then?
Yeah,
And
sometimes like there's the psychological breakthrough there, and other times it's just I just love intense sensation. And so
oh,
that whip can just not even have a
oh,
story other than the endorphins and the adrenaline and everything else it gets. And then the unloading of stress. It's like taking off
yes.
this wet blanket.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
that
Or
can feel so good.
the bliss of being bound and gagged. Um,
Yeah. And it's also
oh, I
okay.
don't have to worry about what position my head is in, and I don't have to worry about saying something witty.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to say, and it's okay if you don't get it. It's
It
okay if somebody else's
totally
kink is just completely confusing to you and you can't
well, and it should always,
imagine.
if there's a partner that's trying to convince you to make this your turn on, uh-uh,
Mm-mm.
no. if it's something that you're moving to volitionally because you think that there's something in it for you, that's totally different.
Yeah.
I
And I
yeah,
like the swimming of the deep end, like what Dr. Willow was saying. It's cool to kind of go into our psyche and make correlations as to
yeah,
what opens us. And I think the ironic parts of this that are playing off each other, I think are really cool and interesting. And I think we need to engage things so that sex stays interesting. I think people get into a lot of habits and they're bored and they don't feel like they have access to their turn on or access to like these
yeah.
places of arousal that people talk about that are so big and like why aren't I having those? And it's like, well, that's up to you to start to investigate what will open you. Oh, and by the way, the stuff that opened you 10 years ago is probably going to be different 10 years later. um
Yeah. You
that's what
know,
makes it an adventure.
it reminds me of my cousin again. I don't know why I'm thinking of her. Maybe she's here.
Yeah,
Uh,
must be.
she had a little quote on her social media page that said, "Life is a banquet, but most fools are starving." And you're
Well,
just
that's a
making
good
me
one.
think about
That's
that.
great.
There's so much pleasure and so much joy and so much experience that is available um, in an adult consensual
Yeah,
manner.
right. For
And
people who are mostly healthy and relatively mature, because
yeah,
there are other things that can really complicate sexuality due to the vulnerability, due to the
yeah,
trust,
yeah.
that if you don't, yeah. So caution, not everyone can go as deep at first until they do some mental health work.
And one thing that's concerning for me sometimes is when people are inhibited and shame-based, and then they turn to drugs and alcohol to try to loosen up,
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
then almost inevitably something
That
non-consensual happens.
often ends in,
Sure.
yeah, a
Yeah,
disaster. Hmm.
yeah. So I'm going to take just a little bit of a side trip here. It was something we talked about at the very beginning. Um, cervical orgasms. In my view, the cervix is the portal to the other side,
Mm.
because this is
Mm.
actually where life, if life is conceived,
Happening. Yeah.
would actually start there. And if you're looking at it on a purely cellular level, well, then it's ovaries, eggs that have been around for millennia because they just go from mother to mother to, mother to
Hmm.
daughter, mother to daughter, daughter to
Hmm.
mother,
But it's the
whatever.
cervix that sucks up the semen. That we need the cervix to do this.
Yes. And it's also the cervix that pushes the baby out.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's a part of the body that we don't talk about very much. And a lot of women don't know that it could provide pleasure. So I would love you guys to talk about that.
Yeah, well, this is one of our favorite topics too. We're touching on all the goodies today. Um, not everyone has pleasure right away when they start playing around with cervix. A lot of times there's scar tissue on the cervix, especially if there's been any kind of leak procedures due to, dysplasia, or even during birth, if there's been,
Right.
there's often scar tissue
Complications.
that causes numbness. It can cause numbness, it can cause achy, cramping, pain. Those of us who, maybe haven't had those procedures and haven't had children also just might have had menstrual cramps. So the cervix, you kind of come into this from a Chinese medicine point of view, you kind of come into your body as with a certain constitution, and that comes from your parents. And so one of the things that I see so much when it comes to cervical healing, cervical orgasms, and all of this stuff is an opening of the voice has to happen. An opening of the
Mm.
throat has to happen. In
Mm.
Spanish, the word for a throat is cuello, and the word for cervix is cuello de útero. So it's the
Oh,
throat
wow.
of the cervix of the uterus. And so
Wow.
there's a really strong correlation. If you fold the body in half at the belly button, the throat and the yoni are a mirror image of each other, very specifically
Mm.
right here through this like straight up throat chakra area is related to that cervical opening. And so when you start to go for cervical orgasms, a couple things you need to kind of be in place, which is one, you have to often, when you first start, you have to be able to like find that connection. Now, it doesn't always have to be, the penis doesn't always have to touch the cervix. It could be
Uh-huh.
energetic as well. So
Uh-huh.
if,
Or like the tip of the finger if there's
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
yeah, tip of the finger or
Yeah.
dildo or whatever you're using.
Yeah.
And that that doesn't have to totally touch, but energetically it can touch. And it can get achy and crampy in the cervix, in that little ring of the cervix.
Okay.
So you have to kind of learn how to breathe through that achy, crampy, sometimes sharp, sometimes stabbing, sometimes fiery, sometimes feels like glass, all different, flavors of sensation that cervix can have when you
Huh.
first begin. And that's not across the board, everybody is different, but it is very common to have to work through and breathe through and sound through. That's where all these epic tantric practices come in. Breathe, sound, and open up that pain, move through those portals of pain on the other side. Like when we feel pain, especially in our vaginas, we're like, get away from it, stop doing that. But what we actually want to do is not resist, but go into it, because into that pain is where we get the pleasure can come through. So it's like, it's not, like you said, it's a portal for life to come through, creativity to
Yeah.
come through, but it's also a portal for us to travel from pain into the most expanded pleasure we've ever experienced before.
And I would add that,
Wow.
like, part of the thing that helps that unfolding, if there is discomfort or
Right.
pain, um, is just being very slow. It's not about
Yeah.
banging up against the cervix. More speed and more pressure isn't going to get you to pleasure in this particular area. Slowness
Yeah.
and stillness and curiosity and being very much connected to what you're feeling. And the thing, if you have any sensations that are uncomfortable, like Willow said, the reason why breathing and sounding are so effective is because sounding has pitch and frequency, and the breath helps carry that up and out of the body. So who knows why there's parts of your yoni that, and when we say yoni, we're talking about the whole
Oh,
female
yeah.
genitalia, the vulva, the
Right.
vagina, everything. When we're accessing a part of the yoni where we feel pain or discomfort, like bruising, numbing, broken glass, burning, I don't know a woman who hasn't encountered that, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, you don't have to look through the garbage to throw out the trash. All it means is that there's like a little,
Right.
like you get a little ache in your shoulder. You just
Yeah.
gotta bring some consciousness, bring some love there, breathe, feel the sensation, give it a voice, and then it starts to unravel. The sensation
Mm.
changes. Now,
Mhm.
maybe it starts at numbness,
Mhm.
present with it, and now it starts to feel like tears, and so you have a few
Yeah.
tears, and then suddenly there's this pleasure, and it spreads wide. It's
Yeah.
not like a clitoral orgasm that goes up and then down, right? It's like it goes woo wee and then kind of have to have some stillness. This is much more, it has an oscillation to it. it's
Yeah.
it's a widening, it's a spreading, it's a deep deep,
Mm.
it's hard to even describe. The cervical orgasm is so powerful, and most women only associate pain with it because of a lot
Uh-huh.
of this. And
Yes.
this is why making sure that you are at a higher state of arousal when you go to explore it is going to make your experience better. A lot of times, so it's like, well, let's just go in and see if we can find the cervix, and you're not warmed up enough. So arousal is really important. The higher levels of arousal you're at on like an arousal scale, the likelihood that your cervix is going to be contracting. So it actually
Absolutely.
makes more space. And one of the things that some of the audience might relate this to is, when you are having sex, penetrative sex, and you want it really deep. It's like, God, go deep, go deep. And your legs are as open as it can be. You're grabbing an ass, you are pulling it towards you. But don't you know those other times when it's like, ouch, like deep is too much and you're kind of backing away, but you're also enduring it? This is
Yeah.
what I mean. When you
Yeah.
want it deep, it's because you're aroused enough that your
Yeah.
cervix is contracting. So when you go
Yeah.
to explore and connect to your cervix, wait until you're at a higher arousal rate and you'll
Yeah.
have a more
Yeah.
pleasurable experience. The other thing is that even though there are 3 nerve pathways that connect to the cervix, there's the
Yeah.
vagus nerve,
Uh-huh.
the pelvic nerve, and the hypogastric nerve. They're
Okay.
all connected to the cervix. That's 3 different types of sensation. All 3 of those, if you were to activate them by themselves, would give you a certain different orgasmic sensation. They're being layered together with the cervical orgasm, which is why the cervical orgasm is so expansive and interesting and like, whoa, did that just happen? Did we just go that
Oh,
deep? It's because you got major nerves firing. And if someone's rubbing your clit
oh.
at the same time, now you got 4 nerve pathways firing. It's like eating a 4-layer cake. So the key
A
behind
chocolate
it,
cake, by the
yes.
way.
And the other thing is it's
Chocolate,
not like
Willow,
those
chocolate.
nerves, like on your clitoris, you can really feel the nerve sensation. With the
Yes.
cervix, it's less about that feeling. It's
Yeah.
more about a thumping.
Mm.
So with a little, it's the pressure. It's like a heartbeat. It's that thumping that
Yeah.
actually makes for the pleasure to start to unfold itself. That's
Yeah.
my experience.
And
Yeah.
the Tao says that the highest form of orgasm that a vulva owner can have is a wombgasm. Some would argue a heartgasm, but the Tao does say the wombgasm is the highest, and there is a very strong connection between the womb and the heart through a certain meridian pathway called the Bao Mai. But um,
Oh,
the womb is the body of the cervix. The cervix is the neck of the womb. So it's like when we're having a cervical orgasm, we're basically having a wombgasm. So we're having the
mm.
highest form of orgasm that's possible. And then you think about the womb as like the womb, its job is to create new life. So here's where we could bring some sex magic in. It's like, what do you want to create in your new life, which begins in this moment, in the next moment, in that next moment. Every moment is an opportunity for new life to begin inside of yourself, whether you're bringing a baby into the world or not. We're talking about like, what do you want to create in your life? So
Absolutely.
creative energy, is just ripe and stored in your womb. And one more thing I want to say is if you've had a hysterectomy, partial or full, and you don't have a physical womb anymore, you still have the
Yeah.
energy of a womb.
Uh-huh.
Taoists really believe like the energy of the womb is still there. And so
Yeah.
sometimes if there has been a surgical removal, then there might be some kind of like block or stagnancy that needs to be worked out with acupuncture or with sexual practices.
Uh-huh.
But you can still have wombgasms. You can still have cervical orgasms. And what I've found in my own body when those are happening is it reverberates up into the heart. And it really expands and opens the heart in the most beautiful ways, and again, it doesn't
Really,
have to
that
be
vagus
with.
nerve connection helps with that.
Exactly. That vagus nerve actually runs right up through the most yin of all the meridian pathways in your body. And we call it the receptive channel or the conception vessel, or there's all
Uh-huh.
these different names for it. But it's like, what do you want to receive? That's part of what creativity is. Creativity is such a beautiful mixture of yin and yang, but that yin side of it is like, what do you want to receive? What are you surrendering and opening to receiving in your life?
Wow. See, this is a beautiful spiritual principle that you just expressed, Willow, um, about creativity, not just being generation, but receiving
Yeah.
Yeah,
and creating that
generative.
flow between you and the term I use is the universe, but
Mhm.
like this
Yeah.
inspiration that comes to you. I also think, that a lot of what you're describing is a form of therapy.
For sure.
And I feel like sex is overlooked as a way of healing our traumas. And also just having a beautiful session with ourselves and or our lover
Mhm.
or lovers, where we're actually extirpating um, the frustrations and the fears and the traumas and grief,
Mhm.
to be able to let that out.
Mhm.
It's To me, it's just such an untapped thing. It just, for a lot of people, at least a lot of the couples that I coach, their sex is pretty much just about pleasure with never letting the pleasure take them to a place of
Right.
transformation.
It's like a sneeze in the
Mm-hmm.
groin. It gives them relief. It
Yep,
might,
you got it.
it might be a moment of like, okay, I'm less stressed now. But it doesn't reach places like bliss, and it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily take you into these, feeling really deeply close. Sometimes we just go to bed afterward. And I've never met an orgasm I didn't like. It's okay to have,
No,
sneezes in the groin. They're good too. We love a good sneeze, but there's bliss to be had. And then
there
there's
is. And
closeness.
there's also a opening your awarenesses, opening your mind to other thoughts. And
Well,
when you allow pleasure to take you to a place where you can actually start to have thoughts and feelings and awarenesses that you wouldn't have otherwise,
and
that to
also
me is that's definitely a sacred sexual path. And
for
it's
sure.
possible to get there through almost any kind of a sexual practice.
And it's fast and effective. Like when you've
Yeah.
got something that you just want to release from your system,
Yeah.
whatever it is, the story doesn't even matter if it's just been a frustrating week. It's like being able to be unedited is
Yeah.
and allow yourself to be in your nakedness, really stripped down. It's so symbolic, right? It's so raw,
Oh,
it's so real. It can just be such a fast way to get back into balance with yourself and to change your
yeah.
outlook and your perspective. And the other
Yeah.
thing I just want to say about orgasms, because I think part of the thing that gets people in trouble so much of the time is they're chasing the orgasm. They're chasing the pleasure. They're making the orgasm the goal. If I have an orgasm or if I can give an orgasm, then I'm successful. And that means I'm okay. And that's a real trap because orgasms are wonderful, but they shouldn't be the goal, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's something else, like maybe it's just the being present. Maybe it's just being in connection, whether it's with yourself or someone else. But the orgasm sometimes can be a setup. So you might be hearing this and going, well, that cervical orgasm sure does sound great. I really want one of those. But if you are like this, trying to get to the goal of that orgasm, it might elude you. So it's better, instead of like judging your experience, am I passing, am I failing, is
Yeah.
to keep an attitude of just curiosity. Oh, well, that's interesting. I don't feel much. Oh, that's interesting. That part kind of hurts. Well, that's
Uh-huh.
interesting. I feel like crying. Well, isn't that interesting? I'm really liking this, and to just
Yeah.
allow that there are more important places to go in sexuality some of the time other than coming. You
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
it's like, haven't you had
Absolutely.
experiences where like it wasn't about orgasm or deep pleasure, but you got something so powerful
Mm-hmm.
from setting something down you didn't even know you were carrying, and then someone witnessing that and seeing you through it. God,
Yeah.
it's peak
It
moments in
is.
life.
It is. We're running out of time, and
Mm.
I want to make sure our viewers get your tips for male multiple orgasm, which seems a little bit on the heels of what you just said, Leah, because oftentimes when I have coached men towards male multiple orgasm, there is that grasping, goal-driven agenda.
Mhm.
So, and of course, we know that that's actually counterproductive. You're
Mhm.
not, you can't, it's like grasping sand. It's going to slip right through your fingers.
Right.
So I would love for both of you to help our viewers understand the basics of male multiple orgasm in our time remaining, because I know that that's something almost all men are interested in. And a lot of the men that I've worked with don't think they're capable of it.
It's so true. I mean, all their lives long, they're practicing orgasm and ejaculation simultaneously at the same moment. So for so many male minds, it's like, how do I even conceive that those are two separate physiological functions?
Yeah.
But they
Exactly.
actually are. And, when we look at like little boys start playing with their little penises when they're, 4, 3, 2, as young as 2. And
Yeah, an infant. I
yeah,
mean, that's
I mean,
true.
yeah,
Infant,
and those
Yeah.
little penises can
infant.
get hard, but they're not ejaculating, so it's like There's all kinds of like levels and layers of male sexual pleasure that I think a lot of men are not experiencing. And one of the things that I see so much with men is on the arousal scale, they may not even be aware of what the arousal scale is. And then, you know, on it, they may not be aware that they're jumping from like a 6 or a 7 straight to a 10. And they're missing all these really great numbers in between of higher and higher arousal. And they don't know how to ride into those next levels of arousal, which can be so easily done with breath and sound and techniques and moving energy through the body. And once they do start to learn how to do that, they get so much more out of that, playing with, you know, having non-ejaculatory orgasms or having multiple orgasms, where they don't have to actually release. It's like their whole body becomes their cock instead of just everything being down in the genitals.
Say that again, Willow.
Yes, like the whole body gets to become the cock. Like you get to have that full body arousal, full body orgasmic sensation running through all the meridians in your body, all the organs, all the glands in your body. That's why we feel so much better after we have a really epic sexual experience, because circulation of chi, blood, and energy is like moving to all these parts of your body, especially your brain, which can get really congested with stress very quickly. And so learning how to have multiple orgasms as a man is really learning how to ride that arousal scale, and then learning certain techniques that we teach. You know, we teach specific things that you can do to, when you're knowing your arousal scale, stop early enough on that arousal scale so that you can, you know, sort of stop the flow of the semen moving out of your body. If you think about semen, every load that a guy blows is like what, 200 million potential lives. That's a lot of chi that's going out into the sheets
It's
or the
impressive.
condom. I mean,
Yeah.
that's insane. What if you
Job,
brought those
guys. Amazing.
200 million potential lives into your brain or into your adrenal glands or into your thymus gland, which supports your immune system, or your thyroid, or anything part of your body? And I think that's one of the beautiful things about learning this practice. And Leah will tell you a lot more about it. Take it away, sister.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, every time you have an ejaculation, you have the potential to create a generation. That's a lot of life force energy to create
Yeah,
life.
you guys
If
got
you,
the best quotes.
I know
right,
that's a good one.
if you can harness that energy by spinning it up, by playing with it, and instead of having an ejaculation, learn how to reverse the polarity of that and have an injaculation, then all that energy that can create a generation can create regeneration in you. This is truly the fountain of youth for men. And so you're learning how to recirculate that. And that's why people who start to study this stuff start to be aware of energy.
Yeah.
Energy, you can transmit it, you can move it, you can exchange it, you can stuff it. There's all sorts of things that you want to become aware of when it comes to energy, because it ends up expanding the felt sense of pleasure in your system, which is why you start to think about, okay, sensation, sensuality. Let me see where else I can pull this pleasure that I'm feeling at the tip of my cock. What if I could feel that sensation in my throat? What if I could use the breath and guide it to my finger? What if I could bring it to the hair follicles in my head? How much sensation can you feel throughout the body? And you can use your favorite chakra. You can use your cock to be able to tap into the heightened sensation, but then use your mind and your breath to expand it. And so the breath and the sound is what's going to teach you to have more full body pleasure. And
Right.
so your partner can paint that pleasure to different parts of your system. So you can start to feel that your whole body is an erogenous zone, right? And so that, just like Willow was saying, you start to feel like you don't end at the tip of your penis, you're all one cock. And also when you start to look for pleasure, for orgasmic climatic sensation that's not an ejaculation, it might feel differently. Not all orgasms are the same. We have different orgasms and they come with different nuances. The other thing that can really help generate multiple orgasms for a man is prostate massage and G-spot massage. So there's
Yes.
something very special up your ass, and you deserve to have a happy one. So when you start to
Yeah.
these zones, I mean, talk about your cock feeling even bigger, because if this is a penis And then
Yep.
this is the perineum, right? That's
Yep.
that erectile tissue underneath the testicles. And let's say the armpit is your anus. Well, now this is all, oh my God,
There's so
feeling
much unexplored
good.
penis.
And you have three different nerve pathways that carry orgasm up to the spine. And the hypogastric nerve is in the anal region. And so that is a very powerful nerve that gives us a very different sensation. So when you activate
Yeah.
that, then you have all the other nerve pathways of the shaft. You have the
Yep.
vagus nerve, the pelvic nerve, and the pudendal nerve. So again, men can actually um, what's the word? You can have all of the intense pleasure that
Yep.
that women are commonly known for, but you got to expand it. You got to breathe it. And there is this point where you want to avoid ejaculatory inevitability. And there's a whole science to really understand the anatomy of an orgasm. Two and a
So
half. Mhm.
some people think that that is breath holding. Some people think it's a squeeze technique. Do you have
I
opinions
have
about
5 different techniques, and I encourage men to learn them all and then find their favorite. But
Yeah.
what's
that? Okay.
important is that you don't do a technique at the point of ejaculation,
You gotta
because
do
for
it
many men, they'll
before.
just have a retrograde ejaculation. They'll end up coming in their bladder,
Yeah, you don't want
and
Okay.
that.
then they end up peeing it out, and they're not getting the benefits. The benefit of
Uh-huh.
not ejaculating every time is you have more energy. You're more
Yeah.
focused, you're more
Mhm.
conscious. So it changes your creativity output.
And it depends on your age and your also not just your number age, but also like how healthy and how virile and how vital your body is. How's your liver doing? How are your adrenals doing? Those are important things to consider when considering like how often to release as a man. So we teach all of these techniques and we talk
We've
about,
got courses at
yeah,
length about
yeah.
this because it's
We've
Yeah,
important.
got
this might be a good time to even ask, like, what is it that you offer to, besides your wonderful podcast, which by the way, we'll post that in the bottom here.
yeah.
But what is it that um, our viewers might be able to find
So
in the way of your services?
yeah, so they can go to sexreimagined.com where they'll find all of our courses. We do have one for men, how to last 10 times longer, really understanding that arousal scale and starting to get moving toward those non-ejaculatory orgasms so you can have
Uh-huh.
multiples. And then we also have another course that's specific for the male G-spot and the prostate gland and learning how to incorporate those. We've
Yeah.
also got one for women on cervical orgasms. So there's a lot to learn over there. And, even when you're taking these sort of on-demand courses, we are fully available for questions. And sometimes people will take the on-demand course and also, get a little bit of private coaching as well, so they can get that
Yeah.
direct feedback about
Yeah.
what's going on for them specifically.
Yeah, and I would just say
Fabulous.
that, like, this is a learning process. What we're suggesting here with non-ejaculatory orgasms, it's kind of counterintuitive to your biology, which is
Yeah.
why it's not easy for everybody to tackle it right away. It takes practice. It takes really
Uh-huh.
paying attention. And I just want to say, look, I've never met a man yet who's come back and said, I think I'm just going to go back to the way it was. Men who have conquered this have more pleasure in their life, even if they're not ejaculating every time they're sexual. They're still having so much pleasure. Otherwise, what's the point?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, other than, I guess, having a ton of energy, which is wonderful, but pleasure is
Yeah.
really important, and we wouldn't
Yeah.
suggest you have less of it. We want you to quadruple it.
Yeah.
All right. Quadruple one's pleasure.
Yes, please.
Well, this has been a sexy, fascinating ride with the two of you. I think um, we talked about so many things that have kind of made me a little hot and bothered, and I imagine that a lot of the viewers are feeling that way about now too.
Cool.
And I would ask you guys, both of you, each of you, is there one question you wish I had asked you that I didn't ask you?
I,
Leah.
ca- I can't think of one.
I can't either. That's a hard question, Veronica.
Okay.
No,
would
we had
really
a very fulfilling conversation.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
I really appreciate conversations where we are floating into one area and then we float into another area and without having a lot of structure. It's actually really nice just to be an organic thread of just following what's there. Yeah.
That's my bliss.
hmm
I don't even do scripts when I do keynotes. So
Well, I also want your listeners to know that Veronica was on our podcast, so please come check that out. It will
I
be
am.
released very, very, very soon. And so we want to
Okay.
make sure that you tune in because she shares a lot of her personal story and a lot about IFS, which is a really beautiful therapy.
Yeah.
Oh, and Veronica, may I mention we have a free gift for your audience?
Oh, please. And I'll put the link in at the bottom.
Great. So it is Choose Your Own Adventure, friends. We have created 3 doors that you can choose to walk through. And within each of these doors is a series of tutorials that you can learn something really beautiful around sexuality, intimacy, overcoming obstacles. So come over to the website at sexreimagine.com/adventure, and you can choose a room and play.
Okay. Well, I'm going to head right over there.
Cool.
Thank
Thank-
you
Thank
so very
you.
much for being in the shame-free zone. This was a really exciting episode.
Thank
Really
you, Veronica.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having
having us.
Yeah. Thank you.